Welcome to a special edition of the Nebraska Football Show. This is a part one of two. Uh, Joined here as always by Inside Nebraska Steve Marik. Steve, we're going to go position by position a little bit, do some superlatives midseason. It's a good point with the bye week, 6 games into the year to kind of look back on what we've seen so far, deep dive into the offense, deep dive into the special teams. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode just like this on the defense. Um, we have some superlatives picked out of just things we want to and kind of just jump off from there. I think we can just start off honestly, just right at the top with offensive surprise. What's been the biggest offensive surprise for you this season?
Yeah, so we're this isn't going to be a Dylan Raiola heavy kind of podcast for real. I think everybody kind of understands that he's good and he's going to continue being good. But when thinking about the offense and thinking about some of the pieces up front that they've lost, Turner Corcoran at left tackle, everybody was kind of wondering how that was going to go after he went down. But I thought Gunnar Gatula has been a pleasant surprise. So for my offensive surprise, I'm going Gunnar Gatula, the redshirt freshman offensive tackle out of Lincoln Southeast. You just don't notice him out there, and that's a compliment for offensive linemen. I wasn't really sure how it was going to go just because we hadn't seen a lot of Gunnar out there. We had heard bits and pieces from the coaches and other players and his teammates about what he's done in practice, and I think Turner has done, from everything that we've heard, a great job of kind of being a leader for Gunner and kind of showing him the ropes and understanding that, yeah, this kid's probably going to take over for me when my time is done at Nebraska. So I've really enjoyed what Gunner Gatula has really shown. It hasn't been the greatest out there. I think he's kind of I think he kind of needs to work on his base a little bit more, get stronger in his lower body, just so he doesn't get bull rushed so easily. But again, I go back to not really noticing him. He hasn't really been a liability out there, and I think that's a credit to him, Gunner himself, but also Donovan Raiola and Aaron Cooling, the offensive line assistant. I think he has two really good coaches helping him along the way, as well as some veteran leadership for sure. So, yeah, Gunner Gatula, he's my offensive surprise. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, I like Gatula, and I will say too, like I think the upside is still there, and you also have to keep in mind this is technically your third string offensive tackle. Like the
Yeah,
fact that you're getting this kind of play from your third string offensive tackle is really impressive. And yeah, I'm excited to see kind of what he continues to
hmm
how he continues to progress down the backstretch of the year and how this carries into next year. It sounds like both Teddy and Turner could be back next year. What that means for Gunner, we'll find out. But I do like the long-term upside of Gunner as well. I think
hmm
he's a little more athletic than both Teddy and uh, Turner, in all honesty, just the way he carries himself, the way he moves. And a guy that, down the stretch could be a guy that evolves into like, hey, he's a really good puller. He's really good in
hmm
space on some of these screens. So want to see continued development from him. But yeah, like you said, I've been impressed with what I've seen from him. For me, the biggest surprise, and it's not a surprise for the fact that he's playing so early. It's the fact that how big his role is at Ja'Cory Barney Jr.
Yeah.
Obviously been such a key feature part of the offense. I forget which week it was. It might have been before or after Illinois, but I think it was either Rule or Satterfield that said basically they've got him lining up at all three wide receiver spots, and
hmm
they have like specific plays already, and we've seen those obviously, but they've got specific plays where it's like, okay, get Ja'Cory the ball here. Like the fact that a true freshman that
hmm
came in and wasn't like this five-star freshman, didn't come in with the hype that Carter Nelson did or Dylan
hmm
Raiola did, but came in as a guy that people expected to contribute in some sort of way, is having this amount of contribution. We've seen some national publications have him in the midseason all freshman teams. Like,
Sure.
I think he's going to end up there if he continues on this pace. It's been really impressive how much of a feature part of the offense he is and how electric he is with the ball in his hands. He's a guy that's been a chain mover for Nebraska, creates some explosive plays. When they need an answer offensively, they kind of turn to Ja'Cory, which again, and him and Dylan have that rapport. You saw it again. Again, Rutgers wasn't Dylan's best day, but that throw across the middle, that back shoulder throw across the middle to Ja'Cory, that just shows how much faith Dylan has in another freshman to make that tough grab across the middle of the field. Something that Ja'Cory, who's like 6'1", 170 pounds, like that's not a catch
hmm
he should be making. That's not his
hmm
game. His game is moving in the open space and creating in the open space, not going up and coming down with contested catches. But it says a lot about him. He's taken some tough hits through this first half of the season, and he keeps bouncing back up like nothing. We'll see how much longer that goes on. Hoping he keeps
Mm-hmm.
getting up from those, but I've been really impressed with what I've seen from him so far this year.
I absolutely agree with you. That's an excellent pick, and I'm with you, Tim. I expected him to play a little bit, but I did not expect the volume of touches that he's getting. And I totally understand why, just because he's lightning in a bottle and he makes plays with the ball in his hands. And you took the words right out of my mouth, Tim. What he brings when he gets lit up, I absolutely love it. And it's something that surprises me because, like he said, he pops up with a smile on his face and he's motioning first down right in the face of the defender who just tagged him. So I mean it's really fun to watch him play with so much joy, and kind of just almost like a effortless enthusiasm. He just steps on the football field and he wants to go. He's like a dog chasing a car. He's like gonna go, gonna go. I'm gonna go play football. I'm gonna go catch balls. I'm gonna go run for a touchdown. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
just like going a million miles an hour. And even if he gets lit up, he pops up. So I'm also with you, Tim. I'm dreading the day that he takes a hit and he does not pop up. But he's a tough kid, and hopefully he keeps getting up from those shots because it just seems like every single time he touches the ball, he's getting a big hit. And again, he's
it's
kind of a smaller guy, but
Yeah, for a guy that creates so many explosives, it's funny. Every single play, it's either there's a penalty
everyone.
calling it back or he's just getting lit up. It's one or the
Uh-huh.
other. Nothing goes well at the end of plays he has, even though it's almost consistently a first down or a
Yes.
big
Hmm.
explosive play. I will say with him, I want to see Nebraska start to hit him on some of these deeper explosives a
Hmm.
little more, turn some of these short crossing routes with him into bigger gains and get him in space a little more. I'm excited to see kind of how his role continues to evolve down the backstretch of the year, how they use him and Jalen Lloyd. We started to see him and Lloyd on the field at the same time.
Yeah.
What that starts to look like moving
Hmm.
forward too. I'm really intrigued to see how this offense continues to grow and evolve because I think there's going to be some serious work done during this bye week to just figure out answers and figure out yeah, like just what works for Dylan and the offense right now. On that note, I guess for you on the flip side of things, kind of what's been your biggest disappointment from the offense through this first half of the year?
Yeah. So just thinking about this one, I would have to go with consistency with the offense. So what do I mean by that? So against Rutgers, let's just talk about Rutgers here. The offense was held scoreless in the second half. At Purdue, they were held scoreless in the first half. Against Illinois, they didn't score in overtime. And then against Colorado, they were held scoreless in the second half. So I just think that I think Marcus Satterfield on offense needs to find ways to just limit those long stretches of nothingness, right? Of just, not putting points on the board. And during some of those moments that I've talked about, they've consistently moved the ball, but it's just like at the end of the drive where it's time to make a play and it's either like, a fourth down or a kick field goal or something into the end zone. They just haven't really taken that next step and converted. So the consistency is kind of like the offensive disappointment that I've kind of come to have. Yeah, just continuing to find ways to finish drives and, each quarter just get something on the board and don't have those and just try to limit those long stretches or halves of not scoring the ball and putting so much pressure on the defense, even though the defense has shown that it can handle it. It's kind of playing with fire with the back half of the schedule coming up.
For sure, yeah. I want to see them put away games, like put games away in the
Yep.
second. I mean, I don't know
Yep.
how many opportunities they'll have in the second half with some of these closer games, but that's the other part of this. Again, you've got Indiana coming out of the bye week. We talked about it the other day, but Indiana, outside of one game, has put up at least 41 points per game. And the game they didn't, they put up 34. Nebraska's going to have to be able to put up points in that game to keep up with Indiana. They're going to have to do the same thing against Ohio State. Like they're going to have to put up points at some point, and we just have not seen them be able to maintain foot on the gas for 4 quarters. So yeah, I completely agree. I think that's been a little underwhelming, I will say. That's not something I really expected. There's
Mhm.
been drives where it's like, wow, look at this offense, and
Yep.
then the next drive they'll come out and it's a quick three and out, and it's like, what's happening? So I agree with you. And I think again that's something over the bye week. I think they're going to sit down and figure out, hey, Dylan, how do we get
Mhm.
more consistency out of you, or not you, but just like the offense overall, because it hasn't
Mhm.
always been a Dylan thing. It hasn't
Yep.
always been individual player thing. It's kind of just been at times it's just like, oh, the unit doesn't execute as a unit. On that note, for me, the biggest disappointment has been the run game, and this they it so much factors um into the consistency as well. Like the second half against Rutgers, if Nebraska's able to establish the run the way they wanted to, they probably score at least one or two more in that Rutgers game, and they're able to put that game away in the second half. And early in the year, it felt like okay, like I felt good about my preseason prediction of Dante Dowdell breakout player of the year two
Mhm.
games into the season, and then post Colorado, coincidentally, maybe not coincidentally, aligning with the benching of Micah Mizuka,
Yeah.
Dante isn't able to have the same impact he is in the run game. And I think I truly believe Dante Dowdell with a runway when he's got a lead blocker in front of him and an open hole to just burst through is a much different player than Dante who has to stand there and find a hole and be patient or break through contact at the line of scrimmage. He just attacks the line through the line of scrimmage at a different pace and
Mhm.
different intensity when that hole's there for him versus when it's not. And beyond that too, after some of his struggles, there's been some okay, play Emmett Johnson. We saw Emmett Johnson against Rutgers, and Emmett wasn't able to get much going. Ramir wasn't able to get much going. It's not an individual player issue at this point. It's an issue between the line not being able to create the same holes they were early in the year, and the running backs not even being able to maximize that. And it's also been on play calling. We talked about this too. We want to see more creativity in the run game. It feels like a lot of Nebraska's biggest runs have been on some of these like
Reverses.
gadgety
Mhm.
type plays, like these stretch runs to Janner and Bonner or Ja'Cory
Mhm.
Barney or Isaiah Neo or Jalen Lowe. Like it's these gadget type plays that are creating the big explosives in the run game for Nebraska, and that needs to change. Nebraska needs to be able to lean on the stable of backs that I think is still solid and can carry the load. Um, but they just need to be able to create more for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, so right now in the Big Ten, if stats mean anything, Nebraska is 13th in rushing yards per game with 136, and then for rushing yards per carry, they're down to 14th out of 18 teams in the Big Ten with 3.89. So I think those are numbers that Matt Rule, isn't really content with, I guess. So we'll see what happens in the second half. But what else do we got on here?
Yeah. Next thing for us, next superlative is most improved. I guess what's the most improved
Yeah,
unit for you? Because this unit does look complete. You could say the offense as a whole, because this does look like a completely different
yeah, yeah,
unit than it did
absolutely.
last year.
Yeah, if I had to pinpoint one thing, I've been most improved. Let's go with the ball security and just taking better care of the ball. Nebraska was minus 17 in their turnover margin last season. That was second to last in the nation, not just the Big Ten, the nation. But they're currently sitting at plus 6. And so that's tied for 11th best in the country. So they've completely shifted and taken a lot better care of the ball last year. Now, obviously, a lot of that has to do with quarterback play. Dylan Raiola has done an excellent job, I think, of taking care of the ball. He had a really bad interception against Rutgers, but it's only kind of one. I think his first two interceptions that he had were kind of like, if a receiver makes a play on the ball, it's an either incompletion or a completion. But yeah, I mean, the fumbles have been limited. I think the running backs have done a very good job of holding on to the ball. Nebraska led the nation or at least tied for the most in the nation in lost fumbles last year with like 15. But this year there's only been one, and that came in the season opener with Dante Dowdell against UTEP. So I think the most improved throughout the offense is just their ability to hold on to the ball and limit you know giving opposing defenses opportunities to take it away. So I think that's been really good to see. So credit to the coaches for making it an emphasis on during the offseason, but also the players to kind of go out there and execute ball security.
Yeah. Again, it's been such a big point of emphasis for the staff, and it feels like it's
Yeah.
working. Whatever teaching points, whatever coaching points it's been on that, it's working for Nebraska. For me, most improved, I feel like it has to be the receivers. Just how
Mm-hmm.
much different that room looks now than it did
Oh,
last
yeah.
year. I mean, you just look at any number of things. The fact that they're able to tell Malachi Coleman, "Hey, you can redshirt this year and develop behind the scenes because we've got enough."
Mm-hmm.
What they're getting out of Jamal Banks and Isaiah Neo, what they're getting out of the aforementioned
Corey
Ja'Cory
Barney.
Barney, Janner Bonner, his contribution to Israel, Carter Nelson, like him
Mm-hmm.
adjusting to the speed of the game as fast as he has. They've got bodies now at receiver. They've got depth. Alex Bullock, he's been a great blocker in space.
Yeah.
He's been contributing. So they've got receivers now. They've got a room that they feel comfortable with, that they can trot out there three, four, sometimes even, you know what I mean, like three, four wide receivers out there, and be
Hmm.
comfortable that all of those guys out there can make a play. I've just been thoroughly impressed with the turnaround from that room, from last year to this year, where you do have depth. You can go a little deep into the depth chart and pull a guy out, and he can play for you pretty immediately. We haven't even seen like young guys like Keelan Smith or Davon Hall and Isaiah
Hmm.
McMorris, and we might not even have to this year, and
Yeah.
that's a good thing for Nebraska.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think a lot of people going into the season, especially right after the season, was like, wow, Jalen Lloyd going to be an absolute star, and I'm not taking anything away from Jalen Lloyd, but that just speaks to the talent that they brought into the program with Jamal Banks, Isaiah Nair, but also Ja'Cory Barney, who steps right in and is playing over Jalen Lloyd right now and taking a lot of snaps. So we'll see what the rest of the season looks like, because I think we'll see more of Ja'Cory Barney and Jalen Lloyd on the field at the same time, and that's going to stress defenses a lot. You would think so. Yeah, excellent pick, Tim.
For sure. And down, I guess, on again, a flip side of that, what's a group or something that's got something left to prove this year?
I'm going running backs, and that kind of just ties into offensive line as well. But let's just stick with the running backs, because I don't think that there's an obvious game changer in the room right now. I don't think there's a guy who has stepped up to that clear number one role. Now, I do like the mix of styles with Dante Dowdell and his power and physicality and how he hits holes, paired with a smaller back like Emmett Johnson, who has a little bit of wiggle to him. But then also Ramir Johnson and what he brings on third down as a pass protector, pass catcher, can do a little running too, and he's kind of shown an improvement in acceleration. I thought Ramir has, and he's a bigger guy too. So a lot of the offseason work with Ramir, I think, has made him a better back. But I don't know, there's just a little bit more left out there to prove with the running backs for sure. And I say, there's not a clear number one, but in today's day and age with offenses, I think you want 2 to 3 guys who are getting consistent touches out there, because it helps them stay fresh for the long grind of a college football season. So it's not the worst thing in the world that nobody has stepped up. But again, when we're talking about the running game wanting to be better, and certainly that's on the offensive line, but it's on the running backs too, to hit the right holes, to make somebody miss at the second level, and do what Matt Rule has constantly told us in press conferences: make that 4-yard game a 12-yard gain, make that 12-yard gain a 50-yarder, make that 50-yarder an 80-yarder. That explosiveness once you get past that initial line of scrimmage. So I'm going with offensive unit left to with something left to prove, the running backs.
Yeah, and I'll go with the offensive line here. But real
Mhm.
quick on the running game, I think it's very easy to, and I say this like as I'm about to get in the O line, but I think it's very easy to point the finger at the O line when some
Mhm.
of the running issues, but it is on the backs too. Like you hear Rule talk so much this year
Mhm.
and even last year about wanting guys to break tackles and
Yes.
like you said, turning those short gains into long
Mhm.
gains. That's on the individual player. It's on
It
it's
is.
on the unit as a whole to make some of those guys miss. You can see in the way they have some of this schemed up and the way it's kind of banking on you making a guy miss, whether it's Emmett Johnson or Mir Johnson or Dante Dowdell. There's times where it's like, okay, you just have to make a guy miss, and that turns into a long explosive, but they don't.
I go back to, I think it was the Purdue game where Emmett Johnson was a running back in the second half who got like kind of like a stretch handoff, and he made that end man on the line of scrimmage who was trailing miss, and that opened up like 10 more yards for him to get. So it's plays like those where Emmett has some wiggle to him and would fit Emmett, but like that's not a play that I think you give Dante Dowdell, something going east west and make a guy miss and then get more yardage. But again, we saw Emmett kind of struggle a little bit with Rutgers, a better defense, a better tackling defense than Purdue certainly. So yeah, it's just something that they're going to have to continue to work on. And I totally agree with you. It's not all on the offensive line. Offensive line at times is providing some holes, but it's on the running backs themselves to locate those holes, execute the run, and then once you execute it, make something happen after the play. And that's exactly what Matt Rule is hoping to see more of in the second half.
For sure. And on that note, again, for me, unit to improve is the O line. And it's not
Mhm.
just in the run game; it's in pass pro as well. I think they've done a good job of giving
Mhm.
Dylan time pretty consistently. But something I want to see evolve and grow in the second half is the line grows with Dylan. We talked earlier this year, about when Turner Corcoran went down, and then Micah Mazuka is out of the starting lineup. Like these are still just the first couple of games for this specific starting five out there working together, so they are kind of getting their rhythm together, and you're starting to see it over the last couple of games. They are finding their rhythm a little bit as a unit, but I want to see that continue. One in the run game of just being able to create that consistent push they were at the beginning of the year, and obviously, these opponents they're playing down this backstretch aren't UTEP or Colorado, just in terms
Hmm.
of the lines they're facing.
Hmm.
But they are better, but you want to see this line start to create a more consistent push in the run game, and then on in pass pro, move the pocket with Dylan. That's something
Yeah.
that comes with time and will only come with time. But
Hmm.
you've had time now. You've had a half a season or so now to work through this. You've got a bye week to kind of work. For Dylan, a guy who likes to kind of create off platform and create when things break down, some designed rollouts where the line kind of rolls with him, or when it's like, okay, he's standing back there and waiting for something to develop deep downfield. Can you hold? Can you stand? And it's asking a lot. I understand, but for the quarterback you kind of have to play this style, and develop into this unit. And again, I think the long-term vision for this room is still very strong, but obviously right now they're having to play some guys they may not want to at the moment.
Yeah.
And they've done their part. If this isn't to take away anything from what they've done so far, I think they've held up more than adequately, and they've done their part to get Nebraska to this 5-1 record, and to help Nebraska win games down the stretch. I think you can win games behind this O line right now, but you can make it a point of, Ben Scott, let's see a little more. Bryce Benhart, let's see a little more. Some of the veterans specifically,
Hmm.
let's see a little more down the stretch of this season, to a point where it does help the running game, because big holes are opening up. And in the past game, you're seeing, Dylan having time to create some of those big explosive plays.
Do you think that Micah Mazuka is gonna um maybe regain his starting role? I know Matt Rule called him a backup. Um, you know, I'm not a coach, but I can watch the games and maybe see that there's a better blocker in Micah Mazuka compared to Henry Lutovsky. And again, I hate saying that because I know Henry Lutovsky has been a really good player for Nebraska. He's been a spot starter and done well when he's out there, and he's played well this season. I mean, he's made some really good blocks. I remember going back to the Rutgers game. I mean, he made some really good impact blocks that helped ball carriers right behind him gain some more yards. But Tim, what do you see with the trajectory of Micah Mizuka? Do we ever see him on the first team O line?
I don't know. You would think at some
It's hard
point.
with him though because of the off field whatever is
Right.
happening.
Right. And that's the thing. It's just like it's more of just like a right now it feels like, and I don't disagree. I understand there's some like mutiny within people in the fan base of they need to
Yeah.
start Micah Mazuka. But for what this team is trying to build and the culture that Matt Rule is trying to implement, you can't make there's no exceptions. You can't have an exception just
Hmm.
because on the field he does maybe give you a little more. The standard is a standard for everybody, and I respect Matt Rule for sticking by that and
Hmm.
making sure that culture remains intact, even at the cost of maybe a better O lineman out there. But it's not like it's that significant of a drop off where it's missed for sure. And I think the push that Micah
Hmm.
Mazuka gives you in the run game is missed, no doubt. But it's not to the point that it's actively harming Nebraska. Where I do believe, if what we're hearing off the field, and if there's legitimate issues there, I think you harm the culture more than help it by giving that guy an exception, when things may not be going super super well off the field.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say on it is just what Matt Rule is trying to build, what program he's trying to construct here in Lincoln is bigger than one guy.
Right.
And so if he's going to make exceptions to one guy because he's a better run blocker, that's not really staying true to what Matt Rule is preaching here at Nebraska. So I give credit to Matt Rule for sticking to his guns, and kind of doing things his way because he has a plan, he has a blueprint of what he wants to turn Nebraska football into and how to get there. And if one player is not meeting those standards, then that's fine. So yeah, we can move on.
Right. Yep. On that note, moving to the to something else, I guess. Player to watch back half of the season. Is there one guy? It just in terms of role increasing or wanting to see
Mhm.
better play, but like what's one player on this offense you have circled to watch the rest of the season?
Isaiah Nair. Isaiah Nair caught 16 passes for 277 yards and 4 touchdowns in the first 4 games. He was playing awesome. I mean, it was very cool that Nebraska finally had a big bodied receiver at 6'4", 220 pounds going up, making plays in the pass game, and just kind of creating exciting plays down the field and using his huge frame to do it. But the last 2 games against Purdue and Rutgers, 1 catch for 14 yards. And against Rutgers, he was targeted 4 times. So he's still getting opportunities, but he's just not coming down with the ball or it's being a good defensive play. So look, Jamal Banks is great. He is a steady veteran. I really like what he's brought to the team, but I think the staff would like it if Isaiah Nair would be the guy who would continue to be that explosive downfield threat because, I think he's just more of an explosive downfield threat than Jamal Banks is. I think Jamal Banks is a really good receiver in his own right, but he's more of a possession guy. And maybe something closer to the line of scrimmage with him. But Isaiah Nair, the past games have kind of just disappeared a little bit. And again, the defenses are going to continue to get better as the season goes on, and he's going to continue to learn. Again, it says he didn't play a lot of football before the start of this season with the injury and the transfer and everything. So Isaiah Nair is one that I'm going to be keeping an eye on in the back half of the season, because if he can get to where the level that he was playing with in the first half of the season, that start to the campaign, I think that's going to help out the offense a ton.
Yeah, and he can be a mismatch even against some of these defenses
Sure.
coming up. Just because of size and speed, he can be a mismatch. And yeah, I want to see more from him. And honestly, I want to see stronger hands from him. I think that's been a
Yeah.
thing with him of just like balls in his hands and he's not able to reel it in. We've seen an interception on him where the defender just rips it out.
Hmm.
From him, we've seen some of these go up and get at balls where he tries something and it is not able to come down with it. So I want to see stronger hands from him because as big as he is and as big as his hands are for real, like honestly, like he's got big hands. You see him like he
Hmm.
wraps his hands around the football. For as big as his hands are, you would think, uh, you would think he'd be able to, yeah, you think he'd be able to. What am I trying to say? You think he'd be able to come down with some of those.
Just grab it, secure it, not let somebody rip it out of his hands. And the he's playing against very good defensive backs. I mean, the Big Ten has some really good DBs. And so it's good on good. And it's kind of up to him to, when he goes up to get it, to hold on to it. And I think that he's had a couple would-be completions kind of get ripped out of his hands, a couple actually the past 2 games.
Right. Yeah. Sticking in the receiver room for me, I think a guy I'm watching down the backstretch of this year is Carter Nelson.
Mhm.
I was pleasantly surprised at just how much he was playing in the first half of the year, how fast he saw the field, and how like the adjustment from 8-man football to 11-man football wasn't as big as I thought it was going to be, especially considering when he enrolled and all of that and the time he actually had within the offense. Um, but I'm curious to see how much bigger his role grows down the stretch of the season. Like Nebraska talks so much about in the Big Ten specifically and some of the defenses they face. You need guys that can win across the middle of the field. You have that guy in Jamal Banks. You have a guy like that in Isaiah Nair. Carter Nelson can be that guy because just like those two, he's big and strong.
Mhm.
Can withstand some contact across the middle of the field, can do a couple of different things. Him and Dylan have clearly been building a rapport, and even dating back to like the Polynesian Bowl.
Mhm.
There's a familiarity there. There's a comfort level there. So I want to see how his role continues to grow, how much of a weapon he becomes at the offense. They've talked about moving him around to a couple of different positions. We saw him get one goal line carry that he got stuffed at. Are we going to see more of that? Are we going to see him more in those type of positions, kind of, and I'll have a close eye on just what his role looks like down the backstretch of this year. Because again, against Ohio State, against Iowa, against Wisconsin, you're going to need against USC, you're going to need a guy like him because those outside corners and the type of defenses that you're going to see down the stretch of this season, they're going to try and do their best to eliminate the deep ball. So Isaiah Nair and Jamal Banks, you need someone that's going to be able to win across the middle. That should be Carter Nelson.
I totally agree with you, Tim. And credit to Rule and the coaches in Satterfield for just like making the decision that no, we're not going to start him as a traditional inline tight end, which some people may have thought he was coming into his college career. We're going to start him out as a receiver where he can use that athleticism. And at 6, he just moves different. and then other 6'5", 230 pounders, So credit to the coaches for actually pulling the trigger and thinking of ways of getting him on the field. Like, how can I get Carter Nelson on the field? Well, he's not going to be playing a traditional tight end. He's not going to be playing over Thomas Fidone or Nate Borkacher or Nate Lindemeyer or anybody of those guys. But we can put him here and there at receiver and let him go to work on some smaller defensive backs and be a mismatch out there on his first season of college football and gain experience that way and give him some confidence and some momentum of getting some passes and understanding what it's like to catch balls in college football and be tackled and do all that. So I think it's a really smart move from the coaches on their part for finding this way to get Carter Nelson onto the field in his first year.
For sure. And I think he can stick there, like maybe a
Me
tight end
too.
is in
I don't
his
want to see him
future.
on the line, Tim. I don't want to see him as a traditional inline tight end. I
Right.
don't I don't think that's in his future. I kind of want to see him out detached from the offensive line in the slot, matched up on a safety or a slower linebacker and let him go to work. I just he's so fun out there at 6'5", 230 pounds. He can do so much different things that, the blocking and all that stuff can come later on. But right now it's just like he's a big body to go throw to. And clearly he's gaining a camaraderie with his teammates and especially Dylan Raiola, creating that connection with his quarterback, and it could be very fruitful for the seasons to come. So I'm excited and hope that he stays out there at receiver.
Right. And you think about the what they've done in the tight end rooms, recruiting around Carter, getting Mac Markway, who's an
Yeah,
excellent blocking tight
exactly.
end,
Hmm.
having some of the tight ends you have there, Ian Flint, good blocking tight end, Eric
Yep.
Ingerson, good blocking tight end. There isn't necessarily a need, I think, at this
No.
point to
Hmm.
move Carter to the tight end room because you have bodies that are capable, that can hold up, that are better blockers than him, where it's like, it's you don't need to develop him as a blocker, you kind of keep him where he's
And
at.
plus, we're like Nebraska. Matt Rule in his own backyard is in a state that just produces tight end after tight end, like power conference tight end after power conference tight end recruit. So, I mean, there's like you said, Tim, there is plenty of opportunity for him to just stick at receiver, and be that at Nebraska, while the tight ends can kind of just do their own thing, because there's going to be so many options here in the Midwest, especially in Nebraska, and who's already in that room right now.
For sure. Closing out the conversation on the wide receiver on the offense before we kind of switch gears and touch a little bit on the special teams. What have you thought about Marcus Satterfield so far? Opinions are all over the place on him.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
I thought he got some undeserved just backlash last year, just because of how everything went. I don't think it was fair at all. I don't think a lot of offensive coordinators would have uh, done much better than Satterfield did with the quarterback situation he was all of a sudden finding himself into with the injuries and all that, to key pieces on the offense. But this year, I've liked the creativity with some of the play calls that he's drawn up. The way he gets Ja'Cory Barney opportunities is really cool and fun. I think that he is has showed that he's been really good in like the 2 minute drill with Dylan back there. Like, yeah, I think he understands that he's got a dude at quarterback, and he's going to attack a defense. And when that 2 minute situation comes up, Nebraska's pretty good. Dylan Raiola is pretty good. He's aggressive. He's confident in what he can do, and I'm excited to see more 2 minute drills with him. But obviously, a lot of people are going to be talking about the run game and kind of being more creative in that side with the handoff run game and getting more explosives out of that. So, I think a B-, B+ area is kind of good for me. Yeah, I mean, it's not a finished product with Marcus Satterfield, but I think he's shown some good things, some really good things, and some other things that he needs to get better at. I think he's not going to blow you away, but he hasn't been terrible either. I think he's been pretty good actually.
Yeah, I want to see a little more aggressiveness from him, especially in the second half. I think is one thing. He has a tendency. He can be very creative at times, but I want to see that just pop through more.
Hmm.
Like be a little unpredictable at times. Switch things up on the defense from time to time. I think he does a good job of that, especially in the first half.
Hmm.
But second half, it can tend to pull the foot off the gas or whatever it is.
And
But I think he does a
yeah, and we sorry Tim to cut you off, but
good.
it just like popped in my mind of when we were down on the field for the Rutgers game, that final offensive series that Nebraska had. It was a 3-and-out, and I just remember turning to you and you're like, nothing's gonna happen here. They're gonna have to punt this ball away. And thank God that Bushini put his Superman cape on and kind of cracked off a 69-yarder and put Rutgers offense in a bad spot. And then the defense did their thing. But I just remember turning to you and be like, they're just going to run it 3 times, and they ran it 2 times. But on the third one, Dylan could have he had an opening to throw it to Ja'Cory Barney on kind of an outside quick hitter, but he didn't throw it, and that was when Dylan was kind of just not himself, not looking like himself, and kind of hesitating with his throws, which is weird. But yeah, I just remember turning to you and be like, I can tell you what's going to happen. They're going to run it twice for not very many yards, and then maybe an
Right, something on
incompletion
third
on
down.
third
Yeah.
down, and then that's how it kind of played out. So I totally agree with you that it kind of looks different when they have a lead and they're trying to hold on to it late in the game. And I don't think that's how Rule wants to operate. I think he wants to continue to be aggressive. But it's a young team with young players at key spots, so they're learning through all this.
Yeah. Switching gears real quick, we don't need to spend a whole lot of time. I think Brian Bushini's been the highlight of the special teams so
Yeah.
far. The rest of the unit's kind of been a mess.
Mhm.
I guess for you, we can talk about Bushini. I think Bushini's a consistent. Everything else is just such a mess right now. I don't even know what to like even say. I guess the kicking game. Do you think we see Tristan Albano again this year? Or do you think they preserve his red shirt?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'll go with I'll go with yes, I think we do see Tristan Albano. And that might be totally wrong. I don't know anything about his groin injury or how it's progressing, but Matt Rule did say that he's potentially getting close to starting to test, what he can do on the field and stuff. So that didn't really sound that optimistic, but I don't know. I think we will. But if we don't, like I said, I think John Hole has it in him to be a consistent field goal kicker. But with everything going on with that unit in front of him, the snap, the hold, the protection, I think it just can be kind of a little much mentally for kickers to have all that swirling around in your head, and now you're expected to kick a field goal in a packed
Right.
full Memorial Stadium in a tight spot. So it's just tough. But yeah, what about you, Tim? What do you think about Tristan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we see him again this year. Like, I honestly think they might just shoot to preserve his red shirt, just because I think at this point you've gotten barely anything from your field goal kicking unit as a whole anyway.
Yeah.
It's like, do we need like obviously you want it, you would love to have it, but I don't think anything's magically changing the rest of the year unless Albano comes back with confidence and is ready to go. Like, I just kind of think they might just stick with Hull and preserve Alvano's red shirt for the rest of the year. I'll say my only other special team stock here is you hope you see a little more adjustment from the punt blocking or the punt protection unit,
Yeah.
just in terms to prevent what happened against Rutgers happening again, because that's on film now, and Nebraska wants to
Hmm.
prevent that from happening again. The other special teams thought I have is they feels like they've gotten close once a couple times. I do think we see a house kickoff at some point this season. Like, I still am holding on to that. I've been holding on.
Well, they got
My
the
like
kid. They got the kid to do it. So,
right,
which Ja'Cory
right.
Barney, he just
And
seems like he's
yeah,
gonna
and
do
that's
it.
the thing. I mean, like, really special teams, when we talk about special teams, like, I feel like they've gotten enough from the punt return from Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, just
Yep.
being a sound returner, gaining
Hmm.
additional couple yards here and there when he can, but just being safe, being very
Hmm.
safe with it. Kick return, they've gotten, some explosives. Sometimes it's just been, we just take it where it's at.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's the field goals and the punts, specifically the snaps on those and the protection on those, that have been a bit of a mess. And that's an issue with the unit. That's not an individual issue. That's just that's a coaching issue at this point. And
Hmm.
that's something that's not won't be resolved, I don't think, mid-year. But that'll probably do it for us here with this the offense and special teams breakdown. We may spend a little time in tomorrow's defensive episode talking final thoughts on the special teams. But be sure to like and subscribe this, and we'll be back tomorrow.